Oh, I miss you guys. Rosh Hashanah. Okay, no schmoozing. Come on, MZ, take it easy. You recording me? This is weird to anyone who doesn't know me. Okay, so here we go. Internal use only. If you're watching this and you're not one of Dylan's best buds, you're infracting. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. Since we're so limited on time, and this topic really takes 2 sessions to teach over, okay, and the amount of investigative digging we can do on it, pun intended, as you'll see soon, is almost without end, right? And the research just keeps coming out and coming out. Here we go. Did the national revelation really happen? I mean, come on. It's preposterous to even assume that it did. Are you kidding me? Think about it. How do we even know there's a God, right? And if there is a God, how do we know that this God is sentient and involved in the world to the point where he's going to communicate with his creations? And if you have a sentient God that's communicating, I mean, come on, he would have done so, right, to many more people in the world, or he would have done so not some obscure place 3,000 years ago to a group of ex-slaves, right? Like, what's the deal with that? And if you have a sentient God who's going to communicate 3,335 years ago to a group of ex-slaves in the middle of the desert, right? And he doesn't write books. I mean, come on, he's gonna leave behind a book? Like he's trying to make it big on Amazon? What's going on? By the way, #1 bestseller, right, of all time, but okay, side point, he was successful, right? And if you have all of those things, and he writes books, I mean, he would have written a better book than this one. Have you read this thing? Are you kidding me? This is God's book, right? Whew. Can't be, right? And that is all a reasonable amount of skepticism. I don't know, sounds more like cynicism to me, right? But I think it's reasonable, right? It's only reasonable based on those assumptions. If you have the axioms, the underlying principles that are going unquestioned in your mind, right? That I'm not sure if there's a God. And if he is, I don't think he's sentient involved in the world, right? And if he is, well, I don't really know what was happening in world history 3,335 years ago in this part of the world, specifically in Egypt and in the land of Canaan, to assume that he would have written it here, and so on and so forth. And if I only read parts of the book in English, mostly through a Christian's translation, then you're right. It's a crazy idea. But if you start seeing evidence that there is a God, which we have been for the past few weeks, those of you who've been with us, right? And you start seeing evidence that this God is sentient, conscious, willful, involved in the world, right? And you realize, philosophically speaking, that it makes sense that this God would communicate with his creations, and that would be the purpose of creation. We're not going to go through that right now, right? And that communication, you realize, could happen, quote-unquote, telepathically. That's called prophecy. It also could be recorded for all future generations, right? Which we find that time period, 3,335 years ago, is exactly the time period when the idea of a written record going forth for generations in the future in matters of spirituality and the concept, I mean, we can go on and on and on about how the world of anthropology and archaeology lines up, which we're going to do a little bit of right now. You would realize, hey, this is plausible. Now, if you start examining the book called the Torah in the original Hebrew with a deep understanding of the many layers of it, you would also realize there's no way human beings could have wrote this document. If you've been listening to the Discovery Seminar up until now, you realize there are 7 predictions that we've gone through in world history that were predicted at least 2,500 years ago, according to our tradition, 3,335 years ago, that all came true, that some of them are contradictory, some of them are supernatural, and there's no way it could have been a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can't make this stuff up, and we can't make this stuff happen. Right? You've seen the Purim Code. Crazy stuff, whether you like it or not emotionally. Statistically speaking, it's impossible that happened at random, okay? You saw about the 4 species that have no reason to be in the Torah other than to show you that thousands of years later, after discovering all the mammal species in the world, we haven't found anything except for the exclusive ones listed in the Talmud. You saw that about the fish as well, talking about many, many more thousands of species of fish that are being discovered every single week, and still everything lines up. Incredible divine wisdom. That's only a small part of it. We can go on and on and on in terms of the divine wisdom that the Talmud shows us. And we bring ourselves now to this point, okay? At this point, we are going to examine, or only begin to examine, an argument that really was for our ancestors. Think about the following. Every single thing that you saw in the Discovery Seminar until now, our ancestors could not have used that as evidence to strengthen their emunah, right? Because all of it, we need computer systems, like you're going to see in the codes the next class, right? That could, show the Torah on such a scale and find distant letter skipping codes in the Torah, which you'll see in the next session, right? It's only after the Holocaust happened that you could have had the Purim code. It's only after we discovered all the mammals and we went around the whole world and the fish and yada yada yada, right? It's only after the Jewish people came back to Israel, the only exiled nation to come back to its land, and that we see miraculously the land responds only to Jews. That could have only happened in the past couple generations, right? So this is what the Jewish people have been holding on to up until now, right? This is what our emunah was based on. Now, I want to start this class focusing on the questions, because honestly, the questions on it are the biggest bother to people. Some people say, Rabbi, you have to prove to me that there was a national revelation. And I say back to them, no, I don't. You have to give me an alternative narrative that makes sense, that is feasible, that can demonstrate to me how millions of Jews, forget about the spin-offs, the Christians and the Muslims who also believe that this event actually happened as a matter of history, right? You have to demonstrate to me a reasonable, plausible way that you can get millions of very smart people, in fact, usually the only literate people, or definitely the most literate and academic people throughout all of history, throughout all of recorded human history, that they can actually believe and die for the idea that this event is part of history and not legend. If you can show me a plausible way that this idea was introduced into our tradition and bought by millions of people, then I can start to question it. But otherwise, like anything that's part of history and not legend, if I have a large number, a huge number, what that number is inconsequential. According to most historians, all you really need are 10,000, 20,000 eyewitness accounts of an event that are consistently transmitted generation to generation. You have that many eyewitness accounts, you have something that happened as a matter of history, not as a legend. Legends, if you think about all legends, are small numbers of eyewitnesses that are reported, right? And you can't identify who those people were, who the descendants were. There are no direct lines of those people saying, that happened to my grandfather. I'm telling you, that happened to my grandfather, right? So, with all that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to examine the big questions that are probably going to be sticking out in your mind before you even start to, and we will, hopefully, if we have time, go into some of the most plausible theories as to how this ideology came into Judaism, and then we'll ask ourselves the following question: is it reasonable that this could have been fake or not? Okay? You missed the introduction, clarification questions only, and I prefer really, really pointed 10-second or less clarification questions that won't take us off topic. Okay, here we go. So, a few points to consider. One, we went through the healthy cynicism, and we said it does sound unreasonable, but only with certain axioms. Then we said the biggest question is, where is the hard evidence? Rabbi, come on. Every other historical event, right, that I know of as human history, we have hard evidence for. So where's the hard evidence for, A, the exodus from Egypt, the fact that these Jews were walking around the desert for 40 years, right, and camping? Talk about, you claim there were millions of Jews, right? So where's the evidence that they even existed? Where's the evidence for the conquest of the land of Canaan, of this land, right, in that time period? Where's your hard evidence, right? Good question, right? That's the biggest question that I get. After you hear the rest of this class, that's probably the only lingering question that will be on your mind. I hope to address it right now in a few minutes, okay? But you have to stick with me because I'm going to speak fast, okay? So number one, that also is working with assumptions. Now, what information you have access to when you Google stuff is only what mainstream academia wants you to see. If you want to have more information, you need to do some really intense digging and know, quote-unquote, alternative sources. Now, alternative sources is a derisive term that's used in the mainstream media and in mainstream academia to kind of downplay anybody who thinks differently than they do, okay? But most of these alternative sources are actually people that they used to respect greatly, and then all of a sudden they said something differently, and now they're canceled, okay? So, number one, in alternative sources, aka high-level Egyptologists and archaeologists and historians, there is a ton of evidence for a huge population of Semite, Canaanite slaves living in the land of Egypt at exactly the time you would expect it to be, right before Sefer Shmos, Book of Exodus opens up, and we are out of there. Peace. Yeah? Number one, ton of evidence. Don't have time to go through that right now. Rabbi Ken Spiro, who is a historian, will be able to show you that at a later point in the next Zman, in the next academic semester, and you will be able to see that evidence, question him on it, ask him why mainstream sources don't report on it. He'll give you the whole lowdown, okay? So that's number one. Second of all, in terms of the land of Canaan, there is a ton of evidence that Semite peoples who formerly did not live in the land of Canaan entered into this land. They were monotheists as opposed to the people living here at that time. They burned entire cities, pillaged, right? Exactly as, unfortunately, to some people's distaste, right? The Sefer Yeshua and other Sfarim clearly point out in Tanakh, and that is a point of historical fact according to many archaeologists, many anthropologists. Okay, now we'll obviously say that those people were the Jews, the Israelites, because, well, who else are they? There's no other nation claiming to be those people, right? We know what happened. There's no one else claiming to be them. We claim to be them. Yeah, that's it. We case closed, Johnson. Yeah? Okay. And now the middle point is the point that really, really bugs people the most. You're claiming there's millions of people and camping in the desert. Well, where's all the evidence for that, right? What kind of evidence are you going to expect to find? That's the main question. Like, what would you like to find in the middle of the Sinai? What's up, Nikki? Oh, that's not Nikki. What kind of evidence are you looking to find? Ready for this? There are two types of archaeologists. There are minimalists and maximalists. Stay with me now, okay? Maximalists will use the Tanakh and any historical sources, any documents that are dated to around the time period of the find that they find in the dirt, in the sand. They will use any historical documents from any culture as a reference point to anchor what this thing might be. You find a shard of this, you find a coin, what could this be? You have no flipping clue. Archaeology is not a science. Science means I can run an experiment that you yourself can replicate. You'll get the same results as me. That's science. That's something that we know as scientific fact. Archaeology is forensics. You walk into a murder scene, right, God forbid, right, and you try to put the pieces together. You might have a good idea of what happened, but you have no idea. You have no idea what actually happened unless you have surveillance footage and you know that wasn't doctored, yada, 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 right? So anytime we talk about forensics, which most of cosmology is also forensics, you're going back in time and trying to understand what happened then from some evidence you have now. That's not called science, or not classically known as science. Clear? Good? Okay, so there are maximalists. They'll use the documents. AKA, in this case, they'll use the Tanakh. There are minimalists. Minimalists say, we refuse to use any historical documents. By the way, it's not even true. Many Near East scholars who happen to be Orthodox pointed out recently that it's a double standard. In Sumerian context, you'll use their documents to anchor finds, but all of a sudden when it comes to ancient Israel, you won't. Oh, because you're a Jew, and if you find out the Torah is true, it's inconvenient for your Shabbat plans. I'm so sorry, you know? But it's a total double standard. They'll use other ancient cultures' documents to ground the finds that they find, right? As context for that. But when it comes to the Tanakh, they won't use it. Clear? Good? Understood? Okay. So, a minimalist archaeologist. Which one is that? The one that uses or does not use Tanakh? Does not use Tanakh, okay? Refuses to. A minimalist archaeologist in Haaretz. Haaretz is Israel's most liberal, mainstream, anti-religious publication. Haaretz, okay? It's a rag. It's a complete rag, yeah? Okay, so a minimalist archaeologist in Haaretz in 2019 wrote an article. I'm not going to go into the whole background of it now, but skipping to his conclusion right now. His conclusion is, we have to rethink the way that we look at biblical archaeology, because what we're looking for is not necessarily what existed, ever. Meaning you'll never find it, okay? What does he mean by that? Just to give you an example. There are copper mines in the Levant, in the Timna Valley down south. They used to think these copper mines were very small. Recently, they discovered that there were about 100,000 miners working in those mines any given day. Okay, this dates way back to about the time of Shlomo Melech, okay, and a little bit afterwards, okay? Now, problems like this, when they realized there were so many miners working there on a daily basis, they asked us the question, where did these miners go to camp out at night, to eat, supper, to sleep? What's happening here? Because they found almost no remnant whatsoever of such a large population encamping at the mouth of the mines. They couldn't have gone to any nearby settlements. The nearest settlements were way too far for them to travel every single day in and out, and still have the koach to actually mine the copper, yeah? So what they realize is these people used nomadic style quarters. They lived like nomads, even though they were more or less settled. They used tents made of hides. They used ropes made of sinews and hemp and whatever the case is, yeah? And there is no reasonable expectation, more than 2,000 years later, to find any remnant of that. There's no reasonable expectation to find any remnant of that. That's it. Case closed. Again, Johnson. Yeah? So he said, when we are looking for evidence of this, evidence for that, the stories in Tanakh, and we say, oh, there must be legends because we don't find any evidence of it, you're assuming that they built large stone structures. Because that's what you find in Greece. When you go to Greece and Rome, when you stand at any ruin, what do you see? Giant stone structures. Pshee, wow, great civilization lived here. We can date it, we can figure out approximately how many people were in here every single day. But what if, here, show me remnants of Genghis Khan. You'll be hard-pressed to find any, even though if you question his existence and the number of nomad warriors he had traveling with him at any given time, and the amount of time they settled in certain places in Mongolia, people are going to look at you like you're crazy. Why are you questioning history, Mongolian history? Genghis Khan, he was a real person. He had thousands and thousands of people traveling. Yeah, show me evidence of their existence. Well, I mean, we have a story over here. We have maybe this thing over here. It says in Tanakh that when they came to the land of Israel, they used the houses that the Canaanites already had built. They barely built anything new. It's only much later when they built up Yerushalayim, and Yerushalayim was the capital. That's when they really, really built up new cities and yada, yada, yada. And the few cities that they did build, we actually find. That's an interesting thing, okay? Fine. So how much of the Midbar Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula, has been dug through by archaeologists? Less than 1%. Cut to the chase, okay? So they claim, oh, where's the hard evidence? We didn't even find anything. Number one, what are you expecting to find? Your own minimalist archaeologists published in Haaretz are telling the world, yeah, evidence of lack is not, lack of evidence is not evidence of lack, yeah? He's saying it himself, right? Number one. Number two is, you haven't even looked that much. You haven't even looked that much. How much have you looked? You've dug through less than 1%. It's like you open up a book, dude, this thing is amazing, #1 bestseller. I open it up, I read 3 words, I'm like, nah, not for me. I disagree with all the book critics, you know? Well, you haven't even read it, right? And you're reading a translated version. It's a crazy thing to say. So number one, I have a whole other story about a jeep that was left in the Sinai desert by 2 IDF soldiers, and they went back to get it 40 years later, and Professor Joshua Berman records from their own mouths that they hired a construction crew to dig for it, and they found it many, many feet underneath the sand. That's in 40 years after the Yom Kippur War. A jeep was many, many, many feet underneath the sand. They couldn't find it. What are you looking for exactly? Animal bones? Human bones? Shards of pottery? For 3,335 years in that same sand, a jeep disappeared in 40 years. What are you going to find? You know? So it's a crazy idea. There is no expectation to find hard evidence. What about the documentary hypothesis? We should have a whole other class about Bible criticism and Near East studies, if it's something that speaks to you. The time window for forgery is way too of a minute point to get into right now, but you can see me after class. We're talking about like this, okay? And this is actually a little bit important for right now. I'm just going to mention it very briefly. Okay, so most of the world who's not Christian or Muslim believe that this never happened. So if it never happened, right, then it must be that someone made it up at some point, okay? Facts, right? It must be that someone made it up at some point. The question you have to ask yourself is, it's not enough to just say, well, it must be made up, right? The whole purpose of this class is I want you to think about a rational way that holds water that it could have been made up and then accepted by an entire population like this. So, what is the time window for that forgery? Someone forged the national revelation. What is the time window that could have taken place? It couldn't have been before 3,335 years because that's when we claim that it actually happened. Okay? When is the latest that it could have possibly happened? Okay? So, number one, we have Dead Sea Scrolls that match up with our Torahs, our Sifrei Torah, and those record in them already the national revelation. So, it must have been part of these people's beliefs at least 2,500 years ago. So, you have a window of about 1,200 years, a little less than 1,200 years. That is the time window for forgery. But wait a second, there's more, right? We have archaeological evidence, and we have no reason to doubt, unless you're like the Jordanian Waqf, and you're trying to or the UN that's trying to erase all Jewish connection to the land of Israel, there's no reason to doubt that the first temple and the second temple actually existed. If you go back to the first temple, you have a known society in the realm of human civilizations at that time in the Fertile Crescent that are living according to their Torah. Again, you go back to the time of the first temple period, you have a society of people that are living according to this document called the Torah. Very important. There are no other books that claim to be the Torah of the Jewish people that stood at Mount Sinai. There's only one. Not only that, very quickly I have to mention this. This is going to blow your mind if you don't already know this. If this doesn't blow your mind, then you don't understand the significance of this, okay? Of the thousands of Jewish communities around the world in the past 2,000 years of exile, right? There have been many, many thousands of Sifrei Torah, of Torah scrolls used in those communities. There have been academics that have researched the consistency with which those Sefer Torahs, those Sifrei Torah, have been transcribed and handed down generation to generation. Okay? Of the many, many thousands of Sifrei Torah and the many codexes that have been developed throughout the years, throughout the millennia, the Sifrei Torah all around the world, no matter what culture they're coming from, no matter what part of the world they're coming from, are exactly identical, save for 9 letter differences. And those 9 letters are yuds or vavs. And there's 1 aleph. That means those are vowels. It doesn't change the meaning of the word, only slightly how you may pronounce it, because there's no vowelization, there's no nikudot, there's no lines and dots inside of a Sefer Torah. That means we have no other document that we call the Torah ever. If there was a first temple, which you'd be crazy to believe there wasn't a first temple, and we have a civilization that claims to be the Jewish people that live by this Torah, and there's no other Torah, you have already a civilization, a mere 700 years after the giving of the Torah, that is living according to the Torah that has the national revelation narrative in it. That means that you have 700 years, not only to make up this the most grandiose conspiracy lie ever in the history of the world, but also to get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to actually believe it, live for it, fight wars over it, die for it, kill people by capital punishment for it. Talking about really smart people. Look, sometimes the only literate people in the nation, in the surroundings. Okay, fine. And we said the same Torah. The Torah is exactly the same, save for those 9 letters that we have now. Okay, fine. Let's do a little bit of comparative religion studies for now. Okay, really quickly. How do religions get started? So let's derive it from a pattern. Christianity, right? How does the quoted divinity of Christianity really begin? Okay, so I'm giving them the best storyline that they have. Okay, and that is in 6 of the Common Era, Mary and some of her disciples. Why do I say Mary and some of her disciples? Because according to one version of the book of Luke, there are thousands of versions of the False Testament, the New Testament. There are thousands of versions of it. Some of them are admittedly manipulated by human kings, okay? There are thousands of versions, and I'm not talking about translations. When you get into translations, whoo, the number skyrockets, right? They're different in the number of verses. They're different in sequence. They're different. They have entire new books. They have new chapters in them. There's no way that has been accurately transcribed. It's not a value by them to accurately transcribe it. By Jews, it's a huge value, right? By them, it's not. In one version, I'm giving them the best story they got. In one version, Mary and the disciples all had a revelation. There's a handful of them, all knowing each other previously, all related to her, connected to her. They had a revelation and they shared it. That's the claim. Do you have any evidence that this did not happen? No. Do you have any evidence that this did happen? No. And therefore, this is a matter of faith. If you remember, back in the day, when we first met, we said faith is when you hold something as truth, even though you have little or no evidence that it actually is true, because you want it to be true. This is faith. Let's go on to the next one, okay? Islam, 610 of the Common Era. Fairly recently, Muhammad claimed to have had a revelation, and he shared it. The angel Gabriel, he says, came to him in a cave and gave him the Quran, or most of the Quran, yeah? Problem is there were 12 versions of the Quran, very different, each of them. Military campaign was enacted by his great-grandsons, I believe it is, to burn 11 of those copies and take one of them as the authoritative Quran. And guess what? People felt uncomfortable burning their holy scriptures, and we still have remnants of those other Qurans. This just goes to show you that if there were other versions of the Torah that claim to be the Torah from Mount Sinai, we should have remnants of that. Jewish people should have accepted that as, oh, this is the old Torah, this is the new Torah, this is the one that we accept now. We don't have that. But anyway, side benefit of studying Islam a little bit, yeah? So, do you have any evidence Muhammad didn't have this vision? No, so maybe he did, right? Sikhism, same thing, 1480, the Common Era, Guru Nanak goes to the bottom of a river for 3 days, he claims he was there for 3 days, he had a crazy meditation, he went to other worlds, he comes back, he shares his revelation. Do I have any evidence that didn't happen? No. So, maybe it happened. Mormonism. If you've seen the South Park episode, you already know all about it. 1820, the governor Joseph Smith had a revelation and he shared it. Do I have any evidence that didn't happen? No. Do I know that very intense psychedelic drugs exist? Yes. So maybe it actually happened. I don't know. Fine. Anyway.
Do Scientology.
No. So you see a pattern here, obviously, yeah? The pattern is that, right, you have one person, again, in one version of the book of Luke, there's a handful of people that have a revelation and they share it. So if you had a chart of every religion in the world, how many religions are there in the world according to the FBI, not including cults? About 5,000, okay? So you have a chart, access, number of witnesses, right? Religion. And you have like this, 1, 1. Okay, one book of Luke, 4, 1. Then all of a sudden you get to Judaism. What is our story? The whole nation heard God speak at Mount Sinai. Back down. 1. It's the only religion in the world that claims to have a national religion. And does that mean that it's true that it actually happened? Absolutely not. That's not my argument at all. That's some people's argument. Not good enough for me. But that's some people's argument. It's the only religion in the world that claims a national revelation, a national event where they all receive prophecy that this is God, this is our purpose, very specific instructions, go out there and be somebody, kid. Yeah? Get out there. The only nation in the world that has that. Clarification question?
Yeah, you said Mary and her disciples. How many people were her disciples?
I'm not sure. It's a small handful, and it's not even authoritative. According to most people, that's not. I'm giving the Christians the benefit of the doubt, right? Most people will say that the origin story of Christianity is later on Paul, this and that. That's already, according to my own theological studies that I had to take at Boston College, at Jesuit University, they forced me to take, right? A course called The Christian Roots of Anti-Semitism, which is just them blowing up their own spot about how terrible and evil the Vatican is, themselves saying it, that they were behind the pogroms, they were behind the this and that, right? They themselves would say that, no, none of the Gospels were written in the lifetime of Jesus, if he even existed at all, and not even in the first eyewitnesses. It was at least 80 years later written down, the first ones. Okay, fine. Point being is as follows. I'm sorry, I'm not offended. I started speaking about Christianity. Okay, I don't believe it's true, by the way. I don't believe it's true. Okay, so here we go. So obviously, this is a much stronger claim. Meaning, if you were going to start a religion, Daniel, yeah, you want to get a lot of people's money, you want to get a lot of women, you want to get a lot of power. The reasons that people claim that every religion is started, which I'm not disagreeing with them on most of those religions, right? Wouldn't you want to start with the most strong claim possible? Because the stronger the claim is, the more chances I have of actually convincing people without having to murder their children in front of them, rape them, burn them at the stake, stuff like that, right? It takes a lot of resources to rape and pillage, right? So it's very exhausting to go from town to town, giving them the ultimatum, and then having to kill most of the pagans in the place until the rest of them acquiesce, right? And that's really the story of Christianity, is you have kings and warriors that force it upon populations, and that's how it spreads, right? That's exhausting. Why? Why couldn't they just be convinced rationally that, hey, there was this dude and he had a revelation, he was the Son of God, whatever they believe, yeah, Trinity, this and that, right? I mean, just it would be so much easier if you had a stronger, more compelling claim. So, this is by far the strongest claim out there. You have hundreds of thousands of recorded eyewitnesses that claim to have experienced a prophecy, and they all pass it down to their children and children's children. Okay? Obviously, it's a much stronger claim. Not saying that means it's true. Just saying it's a much stronger claim. So why doesn't any other religion have this much stronger claim as their revelation narrative? Again, this is not evidence. This is just a thought you have to think. Meaning, you have thousands of religions in the world, okay? Either they're all bogus, made up, completely to control the masses, as everyone believes religions are, myself included, yeah? And they're all false, including Judaism. or one of them is true and the rest of them are false. Okay? You can't have it both ways. There's not multiple truths out there. Sorry, I know this is not PC. I'm sorry if I offended you. Right? This is not trigger warning.
Why does it have to be?
There is an objective truth because they're mutually exclusive. This one says this is how you go to heaven. This one says this is how you go to heaven.
But Judaism says that the nations have 7 ways to get to heaven.
Unless you worship idols, and all the other religions are called worshiping idols and this and that. And even if they're not, they're denying certain principles. They're giving God physical qualities and this and that. And that's against adoption. Judaism says everybody has the opportunity. Not everybody has to be Jewish in order to achieve eternal life. Judaism says you don't have to be Jewish to achieve your purpose in this world and get eternal life. We're not meant to missionize or convert people, that's for sure.
Islam isn't
Of course Islam. Islam is all about converting the whole world. The whole world.
Okay, but no idol worship.
No idol worship. No. Islam is not idol worship. Right? For sure. But there are certain tenets of Jewish principles and Jewish philosophy that they don't accept, right? That's a problem. Yeah, it's a bayah. But Islam is the closest thing to Judaism out there, for sure. Okay. It's closer than Reform and conservative Judaism. Ooh. Because at least Islam, anyone who's a Muslim believes there's a God. No, it's true. Anyone who's a Muslim believes there's a God who's in control of the entire universe and that the Torah was given to the Jews in Mount Sinai. If you're a Reform or conservative, even the rabbis don't believe that nowadays. That is the furthest thing from Judaism possible. Okay? So, anyway, moving forward, another reason why you cannot share this video ever. Okay? Thank you so much. Okay. And this is why I don't like any of my classes recorded, because I'm not PC and I don't care. Okay, so here we go. Now, if you're going to make up a false religion anyway, which at least 4,999 of them, if there are 5,000, are, right? At least, maybe all 5,000 are. Wouldn't you want to use the strongest claim? The question you have to ask yourself, why are we the only ones that use it? They all want to use it, why don't we? So, how did this belief begin? Because you have millions of people walking around nowadays that actually believe this. Billions of people. So how did it begin? It had to begin some way. There's only 2 options. One, it actually happened. Yeah, right. Or, right, it didn't happen and someone convinced a lot of people that it did happen. So how do you convince a whole nation to believe in a national event that didn't really happen? How do you do that? What is this, North Korea? You guys know that North Korea, they wouldn't show the World Cup when North Korea was playing the World Cup. So they did it on the radio. And when North Korea went down like 3-0, they just like cut the broadcast. And I think they even told them that they won afterwards, something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, Rabbi, there's a national event that a whole nation believed, right? And it didn't actually happen. So maybe that's this too. Okay, maybe. Okay, right? So let's see. Only a few people convince a whole nation all at once. One or a few people convince the whole nation all at once, or one or a few people build up this lie over time. Those are the only 2 options. If it didn't happen, the belief had to be secured in one of these 2 ways, okay? So, can one person convince a whole nation all at once? Well, there's a famous idea called a present lie. Present lie means, oh, did you hear that? God just spoke to us. That was crazy. The whole room shook. You saw that? You're all staring at me like you didn't. Avery, you saw that?
Yeah.
Get over here. You're on my team. Yeah. Avery and I both saw it. You didn't see that? God spoke to us. Told us to give me all your money. Right now. All your money. Give it to me. Right? Obviously, it's not going to work. Why? Because there's a very clear and simple principle in sociology. Yeah? You can convince people of something if there's no evidence for it. So if I come here today and I tell you guys, you know why I was like right on time today? Right? Because I was going to be late like I usually am. But then all of a sudden, this big Arab guy on a huge white stallion said, Achi, come, I see you're running late. And he took me on his white stallion and we galloped through Shechem together and everyone was like, get that guy! And he was like, no! He took out a sword and he cut them down as they were trying to attack me and then he just dropped me off right in front of Aish. And he said, can I go up to the roof? And I said, 10 shekel. No? Yeah? That's great. Now, do you have any evidence that didn't happen? I'll even show you I have some blood, over here. Right? If you have maybe it happened. You don't know that it didn't happen. It's not unreasonable. You don't know that it didn't happen, right? So, by the way, anytime you ever buy anything off of Amazon without doing a lot of research, right, you're believing in something without any evidence that's actually true. Yeah, you do this all the time. You bring the date back to your place, you have no evidence that she won't drug you, steal your stuff, right? Whatever the case is. You have no evidence of that. And yet, people do it anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, people do this all the time. However, you can't convince people against the evidence. Why don't you believe me that God just spoke to us 5 minutes ago? Because you have evidence that he didn't. right? So obviously, nobody came along to a whole group of people and said, guys, we are these people. God spoke to us. Here's the Torah. Remember, the Torah has not been changed. The Torah is at least 2,500 years old. The Torah has been lived by its population way before that, the first temple period, at least, going back to the times of King David, right? So, can I convince people that they are the people in the Torah? No way. They know they're not. They know when they were born, they know where they were born, they know how they grew up before this kook is trying to convince them to put on black boxes on their head and not eat pig anymore, which are running around all over the place. Why shouldn't I eat pig? Why shouldn't I eat most of the stuff that blooms and blossoms and grows and is fruitful in the Mediterranean? Are you kidding me? Who is this guy that I should believe him? He wants me not to be with my wife for 2 weeks? And so on and so forth and so on and so forth. Are you crazy? Get out of here! I know what happened to me. So present lie does not work, and that's why none of the Bible critics ever claimed that there was a present lie. But what about past lies? Your ancestors heard God speak. Chaim, your ancestors heard God speak. You believe me or not? Yeah, you do? Yeah? Okay. Your grandfather is from where?
He's from
Turkey. Turkey? Did you know that he was the deputy mayor of Istanbul? Well, do you believe me that your grandfather was the deputy mayor of Istanbul? You would believe me? Why? Because you can convince someone when you have no evidence of it. What's the obvious question? Are you serious? You would believe me?
Like if I found out that.
What do you mean if I found out?
If you told me that, I would believe it.
I'm telling you that right now.
You're telling me that, and you never met him. You're just saying that.
I don't have to meet him. I'll just go on Wikipedia.
No.
Just change it on Wikipedia.
I'll just make it up on Wikipedia. You believe me if I tell you that your great grandfather was the deputy mayor of Istanbul?
I never met him. I never knew anything. Potentially, it could be true.
Yeah? Amazing. Who's got a problem with Chaim?
Where's the evidence?
Yeah.
Where's the evidence? That's not the question.
The rabbi doesn't know.
There's no evidence. I can't go to Istanbul. It's not. I'll find it.
My parents never told us.
There's an obvious problem here.
Yeah, the rabbi's never met his grandfather.
If your grandfather or great grandfather was high up in the Turkish government, isn't that something you would have known? All I'm saying is, I don't know. It's very strange. You don't think that you would have known that your grandfather was part of the Turkish government? Your great grandfather?
Yeah,
I don't know. Don't say it just because you. Okay. I think the obvious question is if I told you guys that your great great grandparents actually were one of the people that stood at Mount Sinai and heard God speak. They got a book called the Torah that was binding, that they had to live by. They had a mission to come into the land of Canaan and take it over. I think, and there are a lot of people also that I think would agree to that, that's something that they should have known. They would have asked the question, well, why didn't I hear about this before? In fact, the Near East Studies Bible critics themselves admit this is a problem. Just coming to a group of people. Remember, you're not Jewish right now. Imagine you're not Jewish, God forbid, right? And you're just somebody out there. And you have your own culture, your own identity. Someone comes to you and says, your ancestors heard God speak. Right? I'm giving you the Torah to demonstrate it. This is talking about your ancestors. Yeah? You have your own thing going on. In order for you to buy in to this and go with the flow and take this on, you're not going to wonder, like, what? I don't understand. But why did I hear about this before? Right? So obviously there's a problem. So they have something called gap theory, where the Bible critics will say that this person told these people there was a gap in our tradition. I'm here to fill in that gap. What happened? Where's the gap coming from? Right? The gap comes from the fact that, your ancestors, they died before they were able to tell over that story. They weren't able to tell, or there's some specific reason that they held it back from you. Something. You have to make up something, right? Now, the problem is like this. Whatever I make up as the reason why, Chaim, you know why you didn't know that your great-grandfather was in the government of Istanbul? Because really he was a defector, okay? And he took an oath not to reveal that because he was involved in secret missions against Israel, and that's why it would be really damaging to your parents, standing in the Jewish community, right? So you would have to ask me, how do I know that? Where did the tradition come from? Where did the fact that he took this oath and he did missions against the Jewish people, and that's why I, as a Jew, don't know that, right? How are we alive if a whole bunch of our ancestors died before they were able to tell us, right? And there's no such a catastrophe in our story, meaning there's no such tradition, except for me making it up right now, that your grandfather hid this from your family, right? You go ask your mother, you go ask your uncle, whatever the case is. Nobody will be able to tell you that, right? So why are you the one that knows? The last question is, who are you? Who are you to bring this back to me now? Who are you, right? And whoever you are, if I ended up believing you, woo, you'd be on a pedestal. And forevermore, you would be known as the person that brought back this tradition to our entire population. Who is that person? We don't find anywhere in Tanakh. We don't find anywhere in all the oral tradition that there was a person that brought back the national revelation concept, right? That all of a sudden it was included. We have no documents where it's not included. Every single Torah it's included. In fact, I'll tell you like this. Now, there is one reference to Ezra that it seems like he, quote unquote, wrote the Torah, he brought it back. That's to be dealt with. I have a whole article I can send you about that. It's one line in the Talmud. You would have thought that this deserves more than one line, and that line itself is misunderstood completely. So I can send you an article if you're really interested on that. But the idea is as follows. This is crazy. Every major event in Jewish history, in the oral traditions, there are many accounts of it. There's a dispute about what actually happened. For instance, the splitting of the sea, right? The claimed Kriyas Yamsuf, right? In the Chazal, in our sages, in the Talmud, in the Midrashim, they argue, how did it go down? How many rows did it split into? 12, one big one. Did they cross over to the other side, to the Arabian Peninsula? And really the desert where they got the Torah was in Saudi Arabia, which many believe to be true, by the way. It's a real theory in academia. Going according to that medrash, that they actually crossed through the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea as it's called nowadays, and they went into Arabia, and Saudi Arabian desert is where they wandered. And if they're searching in the Sinai Peninsula, they're searching in the wrong desert. That's one theory. But there's another one that says that they went in like a rainbow shape. That they came in on the same side that they came out. And when the Egyptians followed them, they all got swallowed in that way. And they came out on the same side, right? And that's why they wandered in the desert. So when it comes to the things like the Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, there are many different accounts in our tradition as to how it went down. The funny thing is, the crazy thing is, when it comes to the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai, there are no disputes about what actually went down. The only dispute is, did it happen on the 6th of the month of Sivan, or did it happen on the 7th of the month of Sivan? And that dispute just stems from which day did they declare in that calendar year was the Rosh Chodesh, was the new day of the month. That's it. That's the only dispute. Did it happen on the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan? That's it. Nothing about how it went down is disputed by our sages, which is crazy. Clarification question?
Kind of. Don't we also know that Moshe broke the
Luchos? Yeah. True. Yeah.
So we do have more evidence of what went down.
No, but we have hard evidence called the broken Luchos.
Yeah.
Well, I could just take a bunch of sapphire, carve it, and say that Moshe broke this, number one, right? But, so that's not really, I don't think that counts as hard evidence, number one. But maybe, you're right. It's all circumstantial. But the other thing is, we do know where those are. We just don't know where the ark is. It was put into the Ark of the Covenant. Torah says. They took the shattered Luchos, they put it into the Ark of the Covenant. Dispute if they put it inside the Ark of the Covenant or they put it in a small little chamber beside the Ark of the Covenant. And we know historically speaking that the Ark of the Covenant was put into hiding by the order of Shlomo Melech and his soldiers when they feared that the temple would be sacked. So we do know where that is technically. We just don't know the exact location of it. Okay, fine. So this is the past life. I don't think the past life holds water. I can send you a great video by Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman about, it's called the rational approach to the evidence of the divinity of the Torah or something like that, or Judaism. I'll send it to you on YouTube. It's 50 minutes long. It's really fun. You can watch it on 2x speed. You'll get a kick out of it. It's great. Okay. The other idea is one or a few people build it up slowly. Let's see. Few families wrote a book and raised kids to believe it. It grows from there. That's option number one, right? Maybe, that's much more reasonable than an entire nation being convinced all at once that God spoke to them, or that an entire nation is being convinced that actually believes it and takes it on from there, that God spoke to their great-grandparents. That's crazy. So this is much more rational. A few families write a book, they raise their kids to believe it, and it just grows and grows and grows over time. Maybe that's what went down. How do I know it's not what happened? It's very simple. If we had more time, I'd give you time to think. What happened, Abba, Daddy, whatever language they were speaking, yeah, to all of those people? The book itself, remember, there's one Torah. The Torah is exactly the same now that it was then, except for 9 letters. The Torah says, if I wrote this book, and I'm trying to teach my kids, this is it, guess what? How many families do we have? According to this theory is more believable when there are fewer families that start. Okay? Because it's easier to lie to kids. You can lie to your kids. My kids will believe anything, right? Don't go near them, right? My kids will believe anything. Yeah? Don't go near them. So the point is like this, right? So, no, I'm just joking. Sort of. So look. Every single Torah says, what? That there were at least 600,000 people. It gives you exact census of every tribe again and again and again. Right? So if you're a kid growing up, nobody else around you except for you and your cousins are wearing these cosmic dental floss, right? And these big black boxes. No one other than you and your cousins are not eating pigs. No one other than you and your cousins are doing all these weird things. Shema, right? No one else is doing this. And you're like, Abba, what happened to this glorious nation that we were a part of? Like, where is it? Well, your Abba has to come up with an answer, doesn't he? Because otherwise, you're not going to hold on to this lifestyle for very long, are you? Makes you all weird and funny in an ancient world full of pagans, yeah? So he'll tell you, well, they all died, right? Where are the descendants, right? They all died. They all died? That's crazy, right? I don't have a story about a catastrophe where they all died in our tradition. And if those kids were raised with that tradition that they all died, they would have passed that on to their children. You know, it's like this. Abba introduced us and we asked them the question, they all died. Crazy. It's up to us to restart the whole thing. We don't have such a concept anywhere in our Torah. Not in our written Torah, not in our oral tradition, nothing. So it doesn't make any sense. And last one is, a few spiritual leaders start a religion and recruit. Maybe, right? Very charismatic. Those rabbis, very charismatic. They can convince me of anything. I even believe in God now. What does my life come to? Meaning, purpose, truth. Darn it, right? These rabbis, yeah? Well, the problem is like this. Where are all the people? I'm trying to convince you, yo, join this religion. It's the best. I gotta give you something, like some swag, right? Swag has been around for thousands of years, right? Oh, what's your source text? What's your source text for your religion? Here, it's the same as it is now that it was then. Start opening up, considering joining your religion. It says that there are 22,000 Levites about. Where are these Levites? Well, they all died. Or they live somewhere else. Oh, okay. Let's go to them. Can I be a Levite too? Right? Where are all the people? Where are the descendants? And here's the other problem. Everything we do in our tradition is labotenu, abotenu, abotenu. Our forefathers. Converts, according to the Talmud, really can't even say those words, according to many opinions in the Talmud. Even in practical halakha nowadays, can a convert say the bracha in the morning? Another reason why we can't share this recording. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shelo asani goy. You didn't make me a goy. Hashem did make you a goy. You made yourself a Jew. Hashem made you a goy. You can't say those words. According to many commentators, even to this very day, a convert can't say those words. Right? So what's going on here? A few spiritual leaders, if they're the ones that started this whole religion, wrote this book and tried to convince a bunch of people that, then those people would never pass on, this happened to our forefathers. And then all of a sudden, there's a giant dispute if they can even say Shalom Asani Goy. How did that dispute start? According to you, people who are not Jewish, who are converted, there's no such thing. Of course, they are the Jewish people. Those are our forefathers. Then why would there be a giant tumult about what a convert says? Can a convert bring bikurim? They used to bring the first fruits to the temple. According to many, converts can't say those certain parts of that paragraph. That's from the Torah level, right? I thought they were our forefathers. They're not your forefathers. That's the idea. You joined the Jewish people. Amazing. You're incredible. You're on a higher level than most other Jews, right? But at the same time, it's very hard to get a religion started in that way, right? Okay. So, and who started when? When did they recruit? Shalom Rabbeinu. We started a little bit later. I'm so sorry. We're going to finish in the next 7 minutes, realistically. Okay, without the show. Okay, so here we go. Rabbeinu, do you have this on key? Amazing, great. I think you're gonna have to use my laptop because I'm not sure if this is working, but we'll try it. Okay, so here we go. Big finish. Ready? Any natural explanation. Now let me just explain this. Big finish. If you've been sleeping until now, my friend, right? I don't mean to embarrass. I love him. He probably just got here on a flight, right? I mean, I love this guy. Yeah, I love you. Here, I need you for this 1 minute, okay? Your mood is going to skyrocket. If you've been listening to all these questions on national revelation in your subconscious while you're sleeping, and then you're going to walk away thinking maybe it never really happened. This is how you're going to know what happened. You ready? You ready? I love you. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Any natural explanation. What is a natural explanation? What is a natural explanation? What is nature? Nature is a pattern of a set of expected results. Nature, by definition, repeats itself. That's what nature is. In fact, whenever you claim something unnatural happened, you're really saying something unexpected happened. Every other time, this is what happened, all of a sudden, poof, this guy jumped 15 feet from beyond the free throw line. It's unnatural to do that. People don't do that. It's crazy, right? So that's what we mean by unnatural, natural. So maybe there was a group of people living in Egypt. They came out of Egypt, right? They stood at Mount Sinai, and then one of these things happened. Watch. Maybe a dictator forced the people to believe it and teach it. Maybe. Maybe they were hypnotized and believed, they were forced to believe it. Maybe. Maybe they had a joint mushroom, LSD, or ayahuasca trip, and they all had the same exact vision led by a crazy shaman. Moshe was a great shaman, and they all believed it. Maybe 3 million people got together and agreed to tell a mass lie. I wouldn't believe that until I met Jews. They can't agree on anything, let alone 3 million people, right? Crazy. That's impossible. Someone convinced the nation that the thunder and earthquake was really God speaking to them. Maybe happened to be a thunder and earthquake. Moshe's like, perfect opportunity. You guys heard that? Yeah. This is what was said. Okay. I kind of heard that because the rumble. They added this belief of a national relation to an existing religion. That's the whole Ezra thing. I'll send you a document if you're interested afterwards. So maybe one of these things happened. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. I have no evidence that these things didn't happen. Maybe this is what the Torah describes as the national revelation. If you look at those verses, maybe this is the source. The problem is, if it's natural, it should repeat itself. Meaning, why has no other religion ever attempted the same thing? If we faked it at Mount Sinai, wherever that is, and we said, that thunder you heard, this and that, I convinced you, brainwashed you, this and that, ayahuasca, then any other religion could have done the same thing. We got away with it. If it's natural, one of those natural explanations, it should have happened again throughout the course of history. It would give them such a convincing origin story. And how could, or why would, the people that got away with it, whoever these shamans were, whoever these dictators were, then why would they themselves claim that it would never happen again? Where did they make such a claim? In the Torah itself. They just pulled it off, but they are saying no one else can ever do this. That's chutzpah. That's insane. Why would you say that? Look what it says. This is what it says in the Torah. You've seen some of these verses already, and we're ending with this. When you beget children and children's children, lots of children, you'll be long established in the land, and you become corrupt and make a graven image, the likeness of anything, and do evil in the eyes of Hashem your God to provoke him to anger. The Torah is saying, y'all gonna mess up. It's called idolatry. It was the big thing back then. It's like you can't go without Twitter nowadays or TikTok. You're gonna mess up. I promise you. And Hashem will scatter you among the peoples, and you will remain few in number among the nations to which Hashem will lead you. You're going to be scattered around the world. Check. That also happens, yeah? And when you're distressed and all these things happen to you in the end of days. Hate to sound like a fundamentalist Christian, but there's Jewish tradition that says that there's going to be 6,000 years of this world as we know it in the current state. We're in the year 5,783 now, as of 2 days ago. And according to many traditions, we are actually 168 years in the future. So we are actually very, very close to that number, 6,000. That's a separate class for a different time. Okay? And therefore, the Torah back then is talking about us right now. It says, when you're in the end of days, you will do tshuva. You will come back to Hashem. Guess what? Tshuva movement happening right now in the last 50 years. End of days. Tshuva movement like never before. Crazy stuff, right? Check this out. For ask now, the Torah is talking to us who are doing tshuva at the end of days, us. Ask now regarding the early days of before you, since the day that God created man upon the earth, from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, whether there was ever anything like this great thing or the likeness of it ever heard. Did ever a people, an a nation, did ever a people hear God's voice speaking out of the midst of the fire as you have heard and live? Ask yourself, do the research. Was there ever any other national revelation claim to start off a religion? Ever? The answer is no. That is insane. In conclusion, why doesn't any other religion have this much stronger claim as their revelation narrative? Because you can't really get away with it. You can't pull it off. And if we pull it off the way it actually happened, then that's just evidence that it should have happened again. how could the one who wrote the Torah guarantee there would never again be another national revolution? He must have known he'd never reveal himself to a whole nation ever again. And this is really the strongest piece of evidence in terms of the national revolution. Okay? So with that, we have to end.